Many of you know who I am, and so I decided that I was going to share a little of my story again, but I wanted to take it from a very different perspective. And that perspective is about the decisions we make, because day by day, we make decisions. Everything we do is a choice, and every choice has consequences. And there have been choices in my life which have had amazingly wonderful consequences. And there have been decisions in my life which have had significantly difficult consequences. So here we go. My company, Genuinely You, was only created about 2.5 years ago. Prior to that, I have had a number of iterations in my working life. But throughout them, there's one of the principles I want to share with you. And that is, it's not the challenges in life that define us, but it is what we do with those challenges. And if you can't change the problem, then you can change the way in which you react to it. And for me, that's been an underpinning principle throughout my life. And as I go through a whistle-stop outline of my journey, you'll recognize just how important that principle has been. Now, why is it? Life brings with us very many challenges, and lots of people fear failure, and in many ways they decide not to do things rather than fail. But in every challenge, every time things go wrong, there is a huge gift available to us if we look for it. So, decisions, decisions, decisions. Moment by moment, day by day, you make decisions that colour not only your life, but the life of people around you. When I was 10, my parents decided that they were going to go to Australia. 3 weeks before we were due to sail, my mum developed a slip disc, and my little brother, who was a baby, developed glandular fever, and my parents decided to stay. My dad, who was a teacher, had given up his job, and so instead of being in Stevenage, in a school where 3/4 at least of the children passed their 11 plus, and where things were very positive and I was very happy, we ended up moving to Essex and initially to South Ockenden. I moved to a school where nobody had ever passed their 11 plus, and for 18 months I tidied cupboards. That had a profound effect on my life, because the failure to pass my 11 plus, I think for many years, coloured my relationship with myself. It certainly made me more successful professionally, but I don't think it did me any good in any other way. And I was very much bullied at school, both in primary and secondary school. When we moved to Hornchurch, which was, my parents had decided that they wanted to buy a house rather than being on a very large council estate. My dad had previously always got a tied house with a job. And I went to a school in Upminster. And I was persona non gratis mostly because I came from South Ockenden. And so once again, I felt very much on the outside. I had a very poor self-image and was very unhappy. I decided to go into teaching, and I wanted to teach cookery for some reason, but I had developed really bad eczema, and I was told about 3 months before I was due to start college, you can't do it. And so I had to start applying, and I went off to a college, Borough Road, in London to teach English and geography. It was a decision that was to change my life hugely for the better. So I started teaching. Now, in those days, I qualified in 1974. There was a huge job shortage, and I had to make a decision in June whether or not I was going to give it go and get a job, or whether I was going to leave things until I heard whether I'd got a distinction and if I was going to be able to do the B.Ed. And that wouldn't be known until August. I got a job in a great school close to home, and so I made the decision that I would start teaching there. And I'd been told that in 5 years' time you can have a secondment and you can go and do your degree and it'll get paid for and you'll get a grant. By the time 5 years had gone, not only had I moved on, but also those secondments had disappeared. I was promoted very quickly. And at the age of 28, I became the deputy head of the largest primary school our largest junior school in the borough, Parklands, which is in Romford. And I was appointed to be the catalyst for change. In fact, when I went to look around the school, I was told, don't bother apply, we want a man. I went to the interview and they said, well, if there's a man who's as good as you or better, we'll choose the man. I got the job. I was the youngest bar 2 on the staff, and the acting deputy, who was a woman, was very angry that she'd been told not to apply because they were going to appoint a man. But there you go. I worked with the head, John Hughes, lovely man, and I worked with him to develop a strategic plan to bring the school up into modern ways of being, because it was very old-fashioned. And in the February half term, I went off skiing, keen skier, skied several times a year, and was very happy skiing and could ski most things. But in those days, it was the style to have the longest skis possible. And I was convinced by the shopkeeper to have an extra 10 centimetres to my skis. And off I went at half term, and I proceeded to wrap these 10 centimetres around my each other and my neck right the way through the week. And on the Thursday, I'd had a bad fall, and I'd ripped my brand new ski suit from ankle to thigh, and was very unhappy about it, and said to the friends, who were all very good skiers, and that was partly the problem, I was trying to keep up with them all the time, I'm going to go and ski, there's a nice run, I'll meet you for lunch. I met them for lunch, they said, we found this fabulous new run, come with us, and I decided to go with them. Beautiful day, sun was shining, off we went. They got off the chairlift, I followed them, they went round a corner, and the decision that they'd made to go round the corner was a very bad one. Because instead of being on the beautiful red run, 6-kilometre red run that they were expecting, we were on the Schindelgratz, which was the most difficult black run in St Anton, full of moguls. It was very steep, it was a black diamond run, and it was a monster. There was no way back, there was no way you could get down it unless you skied, and so off we went. I skied the first third. I then left it too late. My decision to turn and switch on the mogul and slip down the mogul, my decision making was at fault. I left it too late, and I had a bad fall. Took me about 20 minutes to get back up the mountain and retrieve my ski. And eventually I was able to ski down to them, and they were each sitting on a mogul like an elf on a mushroom. Took my skis off. Beautiful day, as I say, the mogul gave way. And I'm told I fell between 150 and 200 feet. I made the decision not to have the blood wagon, and they, fortunately, with the 2 falls and the bit of skiing, I was pretty well down at the bottom of the run, and it wasn't far back to the hotel, and they helped me back to the hotel. The next day we travelled home. My mum carted me off to accident and emergency, and I had a bad concussion, and I tweaked a nerve in my neck. I got back to school 2 or 3 weeks later, and then 5 weeks later was due to go skiing with the school. I was the deputy leader of the borough party, and we went off to Switzerland. As the week went on, I became more like Quasimodo, and on the last day I said I'd got to go and lie down in the evening, and I became paralysed down one side. To cut a very long story short, it took me till the end of May to get back to school, and we got to the school holidays. Thought I've got 6 weeks to get better. Very soon after the beginning of the holiday, very early one morning, there was a telephone call from my head teacher's wife. She had just found John Hughes. He died overnight, had a massive heart attack. So the quiet holiday was helping her arrange the funeral, letting the staff, the parents, the local authority know, and planning for September. 4 months later, I was appointed to be the head of the school. And the decision I made then, well, there were several. The first was, whatever I did, I wanted the school to be a success. I wanted the children to have the very best learning opportunity that we could provide for them, and the same true of the staff. And that whatever happened, I would not let my disability get in the way of that. If that was going to get in the way of it, I was going to go. Now, I wasn't in a wheelchair to start with, but over time I had to use a wheelchair around school. And following 2 failed back surgeries, each time I was wheelchair bound. So I've learnt to walk 3 times in my adult life. The school needed a way of empowering people to take radical responsibility, and for themselves, and a shared responsibility for everybody. And so I had to find a way of reaching each person in the way that worked for them and empowering them to do the same. It was incredibly successful. The school was on the 100 best schools in the country list, HMI list, twice during my tenure. I worked for the government as an advisor, worked for the National College of School Leadership, the London Institute, not all at the same time, but I did that to bring a budget into school because we had a terrible budget. By this time we were responsible for our own budgets, and I wanted more technology and more special needs. And so the only way to do it was to go and earn it, because the amount of money we could raise was quite limited because it wasn't a well-off area. Now, the gift in it, the unexpected opportunities that come out of that is, well, I was determined, as I say, to create a place of excellence. But to do that, one of the things I recognise is that we often bandy those words about and we use words like excellence, but unless everybody's got a shared understanding of what that looks like in the context of where you are, it's a pretty meaningless word. I wasn't going to let my physical limitations get in the way, so I became a very good problem solver. Sense of humour, absolutely imperative, let me tell you, okay? I needed to be the best version of me that I could be, and that meant leaving my ego at home under the pillow with my pyjamas, my nightie. It meant recognising that it was all about choice, and that if I wanted to make all of those things happen, then I had to be ready to step out of my comfort zone and to do that on a regular basis, and I'm still doing it. One of the tenets of our success was about taking responsibility. So many people hand the responsibility of their thinking, their emotions, their actions, their language to other people. And if you do, you have to put up with what they give you. So getting people to take radical responsibility of everything they did or didn't do was really, really important. And it was one of the core tenets on which the success of the school and the businesses I've worked with since have been built. For me, it was very much focus on what you can do rather than what you can't. And for me, that decision to do that has been, I think, absolutely instrumental in me doing well. Because at times, if somebody hadn't filled the kettle up and put a cup on the side, I couldn't make a cup of tea. But I could go into school, use my brain, my mouth, my hands, and there were people to do the stuff I couldn't do, and I could run my school effectively. Many of us focus on all the things we can't do, and I think particularly in this current situation, that's such a dangerous place to be. If you focus on the difficulty, then it expands and gets worse. If you focus on what you can't do, then you become completely frozen. Whereas if you focus on what you can do, even if it's just a little bit, you can build from there. So I've talked about the external roles that I did, and a lot of that was done in part to keep the school at cutting edge. I've got a very low boredom threshold, but it also meant that we were always moving forward. In 2004, I had an ultimatum from my consultant. I was working a 14 or 15-hour day and bits were dropping off, really. And he said that I had to retire from headship if I wanted to be able to drive, I had an adapted car, if I didn't want to be housebound. So which way should I go? I had a choice. The life of an invalid, and I have to tell you, the daytime television doesn't do it for me. And that includes, I was wheelchair bound, there was nothing I could do about that. I had limited options, if that's the way I thought. Daytime telewatching, well, I could read, I could write, but it would be very isolated. And I felt that was a huge waste of my experience, expertise, skills, and enthusiasms. So I decided to use those to be of service and to make a difference. But how? So initially, I was convinced that the issues facing us in education of developing leaders was the same as it was in business. So I set up a research project across industries to look at how they developed leaders from emerging leaders, in fact, from people joining them from education, right the way through to the senior managers and the senior decision makers. And I wrote my first 2 books. And they were to be my calling card. Because in those days particularly, even though my budget was over $1.5 million and I employed nearly 100 people, it was felt that education knew nothing about business. And so to start with, I worked with corporates mainly, always done life coaching, even when I was a serving head. But I did coaching, facilitation, and leadership training in the corporate world until 2008-9, when the last recession hit. And I started to, I'd been doing some lecturing for Essex University Business School on various aspects of leadership, and they would commission me out to go and work with businesses. And they'd always invite me back. And so from 2009, I started to work with SMEs, established SMEs, anything from 5 to 200 staff was the average, really. And that was a decision, again, that made a difference. I could have thrown my hands up in horror when all my contracts went within 1 week, the whole year. And I could have sat there and bemoaned it, but I decided that I was going to find another way. And for me, it's so much about personal development and growth. And since I left headship, that's been one of the big things. I became an NLP master practitioner and coach. And the outcome was really about creating a more healthy and loving relationship with me. And interestingly, when I left headship, I was back to being that 14-year-old who was unhappy at school, who had no self-worth. If I wasn't being a head teacher, then who was I? And one of the things I think is so important to realize, that every relationship you have is a reflection of the relationship that you have with yourself. And for me, having a loving, positive relationship where I liked who I was, wobbly bits and all, was really important. In 2006, I went to see Anthony Robbins at Unleash the Power Within. I'd done my NLP qualifications with one organisation, and I wanted to see as many people as possible using it. And off I went to the Excel Centre, and there were 10,000 people on the programme. And I was gobsmacked. That's very much a Romford-ism from the kids, gobsmacked, miss. And one of the things they did was the fire walk. Now, by this time, I'd had an internal spinal stimulator fitted, and I could walk very few steps unaided, but I could walk a few. In the morning of that program, Anthony Robbins was talking about a course that he was running in California, only did it in California. And I thought, well, I like that. I'd like to do it. But I dismissed it, because even though I used to work all over the country, I always had a taxi pick me up and take me, same taxi driver. And I thought about this course, how am I going to get to America? I didn't have a travel electric wheelchair in those days. How am I going to do that on my own and manage? And I dismissed it. But it came to the fire walk, and with some help, somebody holding my arm each side to balance me, I walked across hot coals. Fabulous, was so chuffed. Turned round. The guy behind me was a double amputee. He had no legs below the knee. He popped himself onto his hands and he walked the hot coals on his hands. And I thought, if he can do that, I can go to California. I can do the course. That night I booked my ticket. I booked my flight. I went and did it. I've done all his programs, became a senior leader. That decision that I wasn't going to allow my limiting beliefs to hold me back anymore has made a monumental difference in my life. I've shared this story with thousands of people now, And many people have said it's made a huge difference to them too. So as I say, all change again in 2009 from corporate to SMEs, working consistently with the decision makers, clarifying what was their purpose, helping them and their staff to take radical responsibility. And as a result of that, creating a learning culture based on development, not blame, and the organization's better relationships, increased productivity, and profitability went up. Why? Because instead of focusing on the profits, they focused on their people, on their resource, their treasure, and they made things so much better. One of the other benefits is that people were more healthy. That's physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And everybody had has better work-life balance. And it's a principle I've used again and again and again with organizations. But I had a growing sense that I wasn't doing enough, that my purpose in this lifetime is to make a qualitative difference to as many people as I can. And so 2.5 years ago, I set up Genuinely You, all online programs, both personal and professional. And so, although I still run Gina Gardiner Associates, a huge amount of my time and energy has gone into developing and growing Genuinely You. And I have a huge mission, and my mission is to positively impact on 1 million people in the next 5 years through the development of enlightened leadership. Not 1 million leaders, but every leader, like a stone going into a pond, ripples out. And Jill talked, and thank you very much, Jill, for that wonderful introduction. I'm quite humbled by it. Every one of us is the leader in our own life. So you don't have to have a business for this to be important. You are the common denominator in your life. You turn up every second of every day, every moment of your life, from the moment you're conceived until you die. But there were things that opened the world up for me. In 2013, I was invited to be a speaker at the Festival of Enlightenment at Estes Park in Colorado, my first international speaking opportunity. And that gave me huge confidence. The surroundings were wonderful. You know, to open up the door in the morning and there'd be an elk just outside the front door nibbling at the grass. Let me just tell you, they are big. They are huge, quite intimidating. But they didn't like the wheelchairs. So as soon as the wheelchair word, off they went. Now, I had written a number of books. In between the two that I showed you before, I've written Chariots of Fire, which is an allusion to my wheelchair, because many people see the wheelchair as a thing of lack. For me, it's a thing of empowerment. But my thinking had moved on, and so I created Thriving Not Surviving, which shares the underpinning principles and the connecting themes for living an empowered life. And the 5 secret pathways of belief, relationships, success, how you deal with change and transition, and purpose and fulfillment. And that's become really the underpinning resource within Genuinely You. But I've been busy, as you can see. There's lots of resources, lots of books, and since then there have been a couple more. I've been very lucky. I've been featured on all sorts of places, and I've done about 100 podcasts in the last year. But I believe we're at a watershed, that unless we take the lead and we start to value and protect this planet and the creatures, including the human beings that are on it, where are we going? What legacy are we leaving for our children? And I think one of the biggest problems is apathy. I'm looking for people who want to join me, and Jill is a perfect example of that. People who want to make a positive difference and are brave enough to step out in front and to be a beacon of light for others. And it's my belief that every one of you that is at this meeting, the very fact that you have stepped forward to this meeting means that you have the capacity to be a beacon of light for other people if you choose to. And I believe everything that I've done to date, and for all, in reality of all of us, has been preparation for what's coming ahead. And I think things are going to get a lot bleaker for many people before they get lighter. And it's going to need enlightened leaders to help people find the way forward. Because there are limitless possibilities available. If you believe there are, then you will see them. If you believe they're not there, it's almost as if you put blinkers on. But you have to have the courage to take a leap of faith. And Jill and I have had many a conversation about the sense that what we're doing is right, and that even though it's challenging, we have to move forward. We have to do it. And if you think about what's going on in the world, this is a very well-known saying by Edmund Burke. It's been attributed to a number of people. But the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. When bad men combine, the good must associate. That's what we're doing here. But I'd like to add, it's not just about staying silent. We need to take action. We need to take consistent action to make a difference. I've told you my mission to positively impact on 1 million people in the next 5 years. And ultimately, I can't do that alone. But if that's something that interests you, it'd be really great to have a conversation with you, because each of us are the leaders in our own life, in our own business, and we can make an impact as an individual. If you think, well, I'm too small, I can't make an impact, just spend the night in a room with a mosquito, and you will know that very tiny things can have a very big impact. For me, it's leadership in a new era of consciousness. And I think there's a huge difference between, the way in which we look at profits. And I think that you can see around the world, many organizations were squeezing the profit out of what they do. But it's actually got a very limited benefit to anybody other than the person who holds the purse strings. Moreover, that those businesses don't survive over time. And so for me, it's about a very, very different way of being. And that's a quote from an article about what I'm doing by Rob Fajardo, and that came out in Authority Daily recently. So for me, there are 10 steps to profitability. Awareness. Unless you are aware, nothing's going to change. But you've got to be aware of yourself, others, and the global landscape. It's really important to be honest with yourself, and I'm talking about honest and not brutal. Honest so that you can do something about it. Brutal is just keeps you stuck, because then you're in a victim mode. Think about how you're showing up every day in your life and in your business. I've already said to you, I don't believe there's room for ego. Ego, its purpose is to keep you safe, but listen to the news and see how egos are actually driving an agenda that doesn't serve any of the ordinary person. You need to recognize when things are not working. Favorite quote of mine, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And yet, me included, we all do it. So, if you've got a headache because you keep banging your head on the same wall, it is time to stop. I think the other thing is that recognize that the need to be seen to be right, and that's different than the need to be right, is highly overrated. And so many people lose the war because they're so intent on fighting the battle of being seen to be right. And we can't know anything. And that's one of the reasons why I'm such an ardent supporter of Jill and Collaboration Global, because individually we haven't got the power to do as much as we have collectively. You look at the IQ, the EQ, the experience and enthusiasms of all of the people in this Zoom room. They're amazing if we put them together. Can't do this in isolation. Step 3, be prepared to step out of your comfort zone and explore. Be curious. Very young children are curious. They don't let that worry of, oh, my bum look big in this nappy, stop them from trying to walk. Ask questions of yourself and others, not in an accusatory way, but in an open and curious way. If you want to succeed going forward, one thing's absolutely certain. You've got to be comfortable with uncertainty. You've got to give yourself time to be still and quiet, because that's where you will access your intuition, your inner wisdom. Learn to follow your gut instinct. Warren Buffett talks about early on in his career, he didn't listen to his gut instinct and he lost billions. This is about being a human being and not a human doing, and it's one of my biggest challenges. Take radical responsibility, we've talked about that, but encourage other people in your family or your organization to do the same. Create a shared language. Because you use a word doesn't mean that everybody else has interpreted that in the same way. You know, we talk about love. People need to be shown love in different ways. We talk about excellence. What does that mean? How often do you say, well, you could do better? What do you mean? And create a culture where there's regular reflection and review. And that's the relationship that is around in terms of respect, trust and integrity is just vital.
Gina, I just want to give you a little heads up. You've got a couple of minutes left to go. So.
Hear about your purpose at a business and personal level and what you want to achieve and why that's so important. And you need to engage others. Know your core values, okay? Really important. And know what behaviors you need from those values in order to know that they are being met. Find and use your authentic voice, okay? You've got to be authentic, because anybody who is not truly enlightened. That means you've got to be honest, but not brutal. And there's got to be a clarity of understanding from yourself before you can share that with others. Your staff are your treasure. Value them as people and demonstrate that you really care, and create an environment that is safe psychologically, physically, emotionally and spiritually. It's the right thing to do and it makes great business sense. It increases motivation, loyalty, good staff retention and the like. Nothing's going to change unless you take consistent and strategic action. You need to not only think about your own, but harness the incredible resource that is your people and create a truly learning environment. And look for opportunities to collaborate with others. A perfect example here. And leave a positive legacy. Before you lead others, you must lead yourself. Every word you speak or not, every action or you take, when and how, leaves a living legacy. And that's true for your personal and your professional life in whatever context. And work towards creating a lasting and positive difference to the lives of those you work with. Time to raise the bar. Many of you will be familiar with Marianne Williamson's poem, "You Need to Be a Light." You need to be illuminating the way for others. You need to be your best self. So when you operate holistically, then you get more success mentally, physically, and spiritually. Are you ready to step up? Because don't be fooled by the illusion that profits are the thing to go for. If you focus just on the money, then you're going to lose out. Have faith. Winners believe that they can. And be a beacon of light for others. But remember, you have to do the deep dive stuff yourself. And that's why these meetings are so useful. And for me, it's about coming from a place of love, not fear, working from a place of integrity, compassion, and courage. None of us have got all the answers. Be comfortable with uncertainty and be the best version of you. Ask for help. So there's the Enlightened Leadership Program. But on the mastermind, I'll have time to go into those 10 steps in much more detail. So I hope that some of you will join me there. So thank you very much. Sorry if I've gone over a couple of minutes.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much, Gina. Just quick jazz hands to say thank you.